A JavaScript function is defined with the function keyword, followed by a name, followed by parentheses. Now, function names can contain letters, digits, underscores, and dollar signs, and which pretty much are the same rules for variables. These parentheses may include parameter names, which are separated by commas. So functions are really a way of packaging functionality that you wish to reuse, and it's possible to define a body of code as a function that executes when you call the function name in your code. So this is a good alternative as opposed to repeatedly writing the same code. So we've seen some previous uses of functions, and I'm sure you've seen me use the document.query selector. This is a function. I see it's followed by parentheses, and inside the parentheses we would select, not h1, sorry. We would select the type of HTML element that we wanted to select, right? So this h1 refers to this HTML element. Also, we've seen the use of the alert function, and I believe this was one of the first functions that we looked at. So if we save this and run it, so my file name is events and functions.html, and here we get our alert. So this is one such example of a function, JavaScript function. Now we're going to take a look at some custom functions that we can use in JavaScript. So like I said before, these two are examples of built-in functions, and now we're going to define our own custom function. And let's start off with something simple. So we start with the function keyword, and I am going to do a function that multiplies two numbers. So I'm just going to call it multiply. And in my parentheses, I am going to define two parameters. So num1, num2. And my function should return a value. So I have to use the return keyword, and I am going to return num1 multiplied by num2. All right, so there we have our own custom function. Now we have to make a call. So this is going to be my function call. And I am going to multiply a series of numbers. So I can say multiply. And here we have our IntelliSense saying that we can multiply any two numbers, num1 or num2. So let's multiply 12 and 4. Multiply 13 and 10. And we are just going to console log these. I'm not sure what happened to my function name. There we go. And close off with, and let's do another console. Okay, so let's save this, and we should be able to see the result here in our console. So if we refresh, go to our console tab, we will see the results of our multiplication function. All right. So what is happening here is that this return statement tells the browser to return the result variable out of the function. So this is necessary because variables defined inside functions are only available inside those functions. And this is a term known as variable scoping. Okay, so Similarly, I could have had a result variable inside my function and set that equal to, let's cut this, say result equals num1 times num2, and then return the result. So this result variable, and if I save this and run it again, we will get the same result as before. So this result variable is only available within the scope of the function. So in the beginning, I gave you an example where I defined two similar variables with the same name using the let keyword. Now if I were to say result equals, let's just say 15, for example, and this is actually outside the scope of this function. So the function scope begins here at the beginning of this curly brace and ends here. So end of scope. Everything outside of this function is a totally different scope. So if I wanted to console log result here, the program would still run without any error. Let's check that out. Right, so we still get 15. We don't get any errors because this result variable is in a totally different scope from this result variable. So that's essentially all you need to know about variable scoping. You have a global variable, which would be this result. So this would be global, which means it is available to any other code in the current document, except for what is within the function scope. All right, so this is known as a blocked scope variable. So global scope, blocked scope. All right, so that's essentially all you really need to know about scope as it pertains to declaring variables and using functions. And just to clean up my function call, let me not console log my function call. Let me just remove this here, just to prevent any confusion. What I'll actually do is declare a variable and say x and y. Okay, then we can actually console log x and y. All right, so that's a better way, a cleaner way to be able to give our results. So yes, we still get 48. Okay, so now let's look at another example using functions. And let's do an example. Let me just add my E here. Let's comment out this section of code. Let me just do a multi-line comment. Okay, so let me just put some space in here. And let us do a drop-down list. So a few things will go into that. And using Visual Studio Code, we have a built-in emmet system. So I basically have to type in the name of the element that I need and then hit tab. So if I need a label and hit tab, it gives me a label. So we're going to do a drop down list, and the label for my drop down list is weather. And then I just need to do select. Because I'm doing a drop down list, I need an ID of weather. And the greater than symbol specifies what will be my nested elements. So inside of a select element, you have option elements. So I just need to type in option, and let us have 5 options. So I would have to say multiplied by 5. And once I hit tab, I get my select list with 5 options. Okay, so that's pretty neat. That's a built-in function inside Visual Studio Code. So the first option, so let me put a label. So we're going to say select weather type. And my first value, I'm simply going to have a filler. Make a selection. And then the first one will have a value of sunny. We'll just type sunny here. Then rainy. And this Emmet plugin really speeds up your development time, so I would encourage you to try to learn some of these shortcuts. They'll become very useful over time. So my last option will be overcast. All right, so save this. Okay, Control S, there we go. Refresh. All right, so I have my drop down list. Okay, sunny, rainy, snowing, overcast. All right, so we have our different weather types. And of course, our first selection, our first option, that just tells us to pretty much make a selection. So we're not going to give that first one a value. So now inside our script, we are going to grab our select element. So let's say const select equals document.get. Actually, let's do a query selector. And we are going to grab our select element. And we're also going to grab first, we will need a paragraph tab, and I can just type in P here and hit tab. So we have a paragraph tab, and depending on which option is selected, I am going to print or fill this HTML element, this paragraph element, with some text. So I also need to declare a variable. So const para. So we query selector, and we're going to grab our P element. Okay, so now we're going to add what is known as an event listener, right? So a lot of the times we have these things called events, and real interactivity on a website will require event handlers. And these essentially are code structures that listen for activity in the browser and run a code response. Okay, so we're going to have an event listener listening out for our selection here in the browser. And we have different events, right? We have click events, we can have hover events, we can have key up, key down events, and several other ones. Okay. So the most obvious one is usually the click event, and we will be using the onClick event with this example. So what we now have to do is add an event listener to our select list. So we're going to say select, and of course select is our element here. Select dot add event listener. And this listener will be changed. This one won't be an onClick. So we'll look at an onClick event pretty soon. So this is a change event, and it takes two parameters, the type of listener and of course a callback function. So my callback function will be called set weather, and I have not defined this function as yet. So I'm not going to define my set weather function. So I have to call my function keyword set, and with my functions I usually like to use caps. So set weather. This one will not be taking any parameters. And now I need a variable. So let me say let my choice equals to select dot value. So whichever value is selected, right? You see here that each option has an attribute of value, and option for sunny, value for rainy, snowing, and overcast. So the choice will store the value that is selected by the user. Now we need to make a decision. Okay, so if our choice is equal to sunny, and we have to open up our function scope, our if block, right? We are going to say paragraph dot text content will be equal to it is nice and sunny, wear loose, or let's not say that. We can go to the beach. Let's say we can go to the beach, sunny, right? Okay, and we can also now say else if choice is equal to rainy, we're going to set para.text content equal to rain is falling, please carry an umbrella. Okay, else if, and you see here we are on our third if statement. So this would be a good candidate for a switch statement. So I'm going to do an if else statement first, and then we're going to convert this to a switch statement. So let's say if it's snowing, stay indoors or wear warm clothing. And our final else if, so if our choice is equal to overcast, rain is, here we go. We're going to set our text context equal to the sky is gloomy, it may rain in a minute. Okay, Okay, so let me ensure I have my proper semicolons in place, and this may, to ensure better readability, we could put each if-else statement on a new line. That looks a bit better. So once again, we have stored our choice in this variable, which would be the value of our drop-down list option. So it's intuitive enough to know that our value corresponds with the value we have set here. And then we have our choice. If it's equal to what is our actual value, we will set the text content for our paragraph, which we have stored in para, to whatever this text is. So I think this should do the trick. I think we may need one more else. Else, if there's no selection, we can just say para.text content is equal to an empty string. All right, so we have saved this. Now let us check it out. So let's refresh. And now let's make a selection. Today is sunny. It is nice and sunny. We can go to the beach. It's snowing. It is snowing. Stay indoors and wear warm clothing. Overcast. The sky is gloomy. It may rain any minute. Right? Rain is falling. Please carry an umbrella. And if we just click on our default, that whole paragraph string clears out. And that's what this last else statement is doing. So like I said before, this is a good candidate for a switch statement. So that can be something that you try out on your own. Try to convert this if-else block into a switch statement, and it should pretty much have the same functionality as our program has right now.